Hey grade 4, it's Miss Whitmore here, and we are going to continue learning about fractions. Okay, so today we are into our lesson 2, which is exciting. We get to learn a little bit more about it. I want to start us off with going over what we learned last class. So the last lesson we had, we noticed that we basically find fractions everywhere. So we find it in baking, we find it in test marks, we find it in money, and so on. We also noticed that fractions point out parts of a whole. In addition, we also went over how to write fractions. So in this situation here, in the example I've given, 2 out of 5 parts are gray, which is written as 2 over 5. 3 out of 5 parts are white, which is written as 3 over 5. So what are we learning today? Today we're going to learn some vocabulary to add on to things that you already know. We're also going to look at the value of fractions, and we're also going to look at the importance of equally sized parts in fractions. First, we're going to start with those kind of vocabulary words I was talking about. So right now you're at a point where you already kind of know how to write fractions, but I'm going to give you 2 words to explain yourselves a bit better. And these are 2 words that I would like you to know. So the top number of a fraction is called the numerator. It tells you the number of parts you're talking about. So if I was writing a fraction like in this case about the shaded parts, my numerator would be a 2 because there's 2 shaded parts. The center line is replacing the out of portion that we can say. So for this case, we would say 2 out of 5 parts are gray. But because we're mathematicians and we're lazy, we're going to replace this out of with a line. Okay, because that's a lot quicker. The bottom number is the denominator. Now this tells you the total number of parts there are. So as you can see in our situation here, we have 5 parts in total that make up our whole, so our 5 goes on the bottom. I could do the reverse as well if I was talking about the parts that are not shaded and that are white. I would say 3 out of 5 or 3 over 5 pieces are white. Now please remember these words. Now the value of fractions. So we have somewhat gone over this as we've been learning about them, but there's a couple things that need to be explicitly pointed out. So each part is valued in this situation, in this pie, as 1 out of 5 pieces, or 1 over 5. Okay, and this is because in total there are 5 pieces. So if I'm just talking about one piece for some reason, it's going to have the value of 1 over 5. So it's always important that you count how many pieces there are. The total number of pieces goes as your denominator, and knowing that each piece itself has a value of 1 out of 5. So I want you to look at this chart here, and I want you to pause the video and write the value of what each part in this pie or cake or whatever you want to call it would be. Okay, so you're going to count the total number of parts, and you're going to make sure you put that in the right spot as either your denominator or numerator, and you're going to make sure you're talking about the right number as well. So please pause the video here and press play again when you check your mark or check your answers. Okay, so fingers crossed that you did pause the video. So the logic around this one is the same as the last one. In total, there are 7 parts to this. So my denominator, my bottom number, is going to be a 7. And in each situation, I'm talking about one piece. So each piece is going to have the value of 1 out of 7 parts, or 1 over 7. Now, when we talk about more than one part, which we have done already, it changes a little bit the way we have to think about it. So in total, each individual piece here will have the value of 1 out of 7. But now, because we're talking about more than one pieces, it kind of changes slightly. So if we talk about the shaded parts, so in this situation, we see that there are 2 out of 7 parts that are shaded. If I'm asking you how many parts are shaded, you're going to tell me 2 out of 7. But that doesn't change the value of the individual piece. This piece itself is still going to be worth 1 over 7. This piece itself is still going to be 1 over 7. But as a collective, as a group, because they're the shaded pieces, we're going to put those two together and say 2 out of 7 are shaded. So I would like you to practice. So first I want you to go through, write the value of each part in this situation, and then I want you to tell me what the value of the shaded part is. So you need to pause the video here, write down what you think, and then press play again when you want to check your answer, please. Yes, so 1 out of 3 parts are shaded. Now, each piece here is worth 1 over 3 because there's 3 pieces in total, and each one is just one piece. And same thing with the shaded pieces, only one is shaded. So the answer is 1 over 3. Now this is kind of our last little bit of information for our lesson. So it's very, very, very important that fractions have equally valued pieces. So if you've noticed in all my examples, those circles I've been using, the pieces that are divided up are all the same size in those circles. And that's because fractions will change based on sizes of pieces. So I want you to look between these two photos here and just think to yourself which picture shows equally valued pieces. I'm going to guess that you probably picked this yellow piece here because each piece looks roughly the same size. And if we were to talk about these in fractions, well, there's 4 pieces in total, so that would be our denominator, the bottom number, and each piece, because it's 1 that we're talking about, would have the numerator or the top number of 1. So it would be 1 over 4 for each of these. Now if we come over to this photo here, technically, yes, I think it's a cake, I'll say it's a cake, is broken up into 3 pieces. But are these pieces the same size? No, they're not. If I told you this piece was worth 1 out of 3, this piece was worth 1 out of 3, and this piece was worth 1 out of 3, you'd probably look at me a little bit strange, because if I was cutting up this cake thing for 3 of us, and I told you, oh, we're each getting 1 out of 3, you'd be like, no, because this 1 out of 3 piece is gigantic compared to these ones. So whenever we're talking about fractions, we need to make sure that we're talking about equally valued pieces. We don't want to see these terribly cut cakes. We want to see these nice even ones, okay? So what is going to happen now, because it's the end of our lesson, is you are going to have a quiz in your Google Classroom waiting for you. You can do that at any point during this week if you want. It's just for me to check in with you to see what you're learning or how much is sticking with you. Please don't cheat on this. This is not worth anything other than to tell me, do I need to go over a few things a little bit more? So please, 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 grade 4, just make sure you're being honest in this assessment for me, because it'll really just benefit you in the end, and let me know if I need to go over anything. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you next class.